Hello, hello. Welcome back to Peak Northwest, an outdoors and travel podcast by the Oregonian and Oregon Live, dedicated to the adventure and exploration of our beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm Jamie Hale.
And I'm Vicki Connor. Together, we take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting destinations in our region, discussing where to go, what to do, and places to see. And today we are back with our third installment of My Epic Adventure. And in these episodes, we chat with colleagues and friends about some of their most wild trips and experiences in the region.
That's right, Vicki. And today we are talking with our colleague, Jayati Ramakrishnan, transportation and housing reporter here at the Oregonian and Oregon Live. Jayati, thanks so much and welcome back.
It's good to be back.
We were just talking about how you were on the podcast almost like right at the beginning, before my time. So we are very excited to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm a big fan of the pod, and it's exciting to be with you guys.
So, Jayati, I hear that you have a pretty epic road trip through southern and eastern Oregon to tell us about.
Yeah, I do. And when you guys asked me to do this, I really had to dig back because this was like 2.5 years ago. So I haven't really thought about a lot of this since then, but it's good that you reminded me because now I'm going back and like looking at some of the places I went and thinking, yeah, I need to go back there.
So was this during like pandemic times where everyone's just inside, but like you need to do something type of road trip?
Exactly. So this was in summer of 2020. So pretty soon after the pandemic had started. And I, for a long time, had been wanting to do a big trip and see parts of Oregon that I've never seen. So I've been pretty fortunate. I've traveled a lot around the state. I've gotten to live around the state, but there were still some things that I hadn't seen. And so I figured that, I had a week off in the summer and it would be a perfect time. During that part of the pandemic, there was really not a lot you could do, but this is something that I could do is, take a road trip, camp, hike, and do a lot of stuff outside. And so it kind of worked out, just perfect timing.
Well, take us to the beginning. What was what were you thinking? What was your big idea when you were planning this out?
What was I thinking, Jamie? That is a great question because I sometimes look back and I ask myself that now. But so taking us all the way back to this time, magical time when I was planning this trip, I had it was a pipe dream. I really wanted to drive, I'm so embarrassed to say this, but I wanted to drive around the perimeter of the state. And I thought in my naivete, and I've driven a lot, okay? Like I should have known this, but I was like, I can do that in a week. And I could have done that in a week if I had just driven and slept, and that was it. So as I was looking at maps and like trying to plan out the route, I was quickly realizing that wouldn't be a smart choice. And so instead, I decided to kind of focus on an area that I really hadn't spent any time in, and that was southeastern Oregon. So I've driven through southeastern Oregon one time in college on a road trip with friends when we were headed to Utah, but we didn't stop much. We, didn't really get a chance to sightsee. And so I wanted to get to that area, spend a little time, and then so I decided to get there and then work my way back. And so I was joined by my best friend who... The main takeaway from this trip is that my friend has the patience of a saint, because there was a lot of things that, again, looking back on this trip, were pretty crazy. So what we decided was we would start our trip in the Alvord Desert and then work our way back, essentially along the southern border of Oregon. And so what we did was, first day, we went all the way from Portland to the Alvord Desert, which is like 8 hours.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And managed to make it before sundown, which is pretty impressive. So we stopped in Bend for lunch. We took Highway 26, so to Bend, stopped in Bend for lunch, and then went Bend to Burns, filled up on gas. And as you know, I'm sure, Jamie, there's not a lot of, you have to kind of get filled up on gas and, make sure you have a printed out map and stuff, because self-service stores, once you get past Burns, there's not a whole lot. And so
Jayati, I have an important question. What car were you driving? Because I know you have a pretty cool, vintage car.
I didn't have the Bronc at that time.
Okay.
So here's the thing, though. I don't think I would have taken that.
Okay.
It would have, I hate to say it, but I don't think she would have made it. So,
Okay.
No, actually, that's a great question, though. So we rented a car because at the time, the car that I had was also pretty old, and I had doubts about whether it could make the trip. So we rented, and it was fine. I mean, just did it enterprise rent a car. And it was like a small SUV, and that was perfect for the two of us and all our stuff. It was no issues with any of the terrain. So yeah, I recommend, that was the easiest way to do it.
Got it. Okay. So you went from Portland to Bend to Burns.
Portland to Bend to Burns.
Okay.
Filled up on gas and got some some water and stuff that we thought we might need extra of at a grocery store in Burns. And then from there, we went to the Alvord Desert, and we got there. It was probably 6 p.m. when we got to the Alvord Desert, and it's summer, so we had quite a bit of daylight left. And so, with the Alvord Desert, you can camp on the playa, you can drive on the playa, you could do anything you want on the playa. So that's what we did. We set up camp, and then, like jerks, we took our car out and drove around on the playa because, as you probably know, there's no speed limit out there. So there's a lot of people out there racing their cars. So yeah, we were out there, we had a good time. We ate dinner. When it got dark, we stargazed a little bit. And there was actually a meteor shower happening at the time. So it was perfect timing. And then, so the Alvord Desert, there's some hot springs, right at the edge of the playa, the Alvord Hot Springs. And I think there's others as well. Jamie, maybe you can correct me on this, but I believe there's a couple out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple, not all of them are safe to put your body into.
Yeah.
There's some that say hot springs, but they will kill you if you try to set foot into them.
Okay.
But the Alvord Hot Springs is good. That one's solid. That's the main one to go to.
So that's where we went. After we set up camp and had dinner and it got dark, we decided to take a little stroll over to the hot springs. And, everything seems close when you're in a car. And so we decided to walk. I wouldn't do that if I was going on this trip again. I would drive there at night. It was a little bit of an adventure finding our way back at night. But it was cool. And one of the things that really shocked me, when we got to the hot springs, was just how busy it was. It was and we were listening to people who were there, chatting with each other. And there was people from all over. We were probably the most local. Being from the Portland area, there was people from Idaho, Southern California. I was just how did they know about this place? But yeah, it was interesting. That was probably the busiest place we went, the whole trip. There was just a ton of people at this hot spring in this remote corner of Oregon.
Yeah, I was about to say, we've talked about going out there for a Peak Northwest video shoot just because it's so far out there in the corner of the state, but I'm shocked that many people were there.
I was too, and it was, height of the pandemic, so I was really shocked.
Yeah, people.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was all day one?
That was all day one, and so it was an eventful trip, and I will say, here's again, other than the fact that my friend is a saint for putting up with my harebrained schemes, the other takeaway I have is that I had a very rigid plan of what I wanted to do. I wanted to drive across the southern border of the state. I wanted to see a different place every day. And that was cool. But doing this again, I would definitely take more time and maybe go less places, because some of the places that we stopped were really amazing. And to keep up with the schedule, I was oh, okay, well, we can't stay that long. And so, yeah, we did cover a lot of ground. I mean, we were probably averaging 200 miles of driving a day.
Oh
and
my gosh.
So it was, we saw a lot, but if I did this again, which I hope to at some point, I would either take a lot more time or cover less ground and spend more time in a few places.
And remind me, how many days total was this trip?
It was 6 days. So
Okay.
the last day was just coming back, but it was, 6 full days of being out on the road. And it was crazy. And I should note that I had never camped before. And so I was, and it was fine. Actually, like everything with the camping worked out pretty well, but I did not know how to pitch a tent before I went on this trip. So I had to watch a YouTube video a couple days before. And I'll do a Peak Northwest plug. The week before, Jamie and former host Jim did a podcast about like camping essentials and basics. So I listened to that and it was very helpful. So, but yeah, I never camped, but I have camped since. It definitely like made me love camping.
Oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
So did you have all the so you had all the camping essentials after you listened to the podcast, of course?
Yeah. So like I have since bought a tent of my own, but I borrowed one for this trip.
Okay.
And then all the other stuff, like I either borrowed from people or bought, or my friend who joined me, she had some of it. So we were fine. Like we made out pretty well. Like, but yeah, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I was just like, I'm going on this trip and like the details will fall into place. So,
okay. So what were you thinking after that first day? How were your energy levels? Were you like stoked and ready to keep on going?
The first day was tough. I'm not going to lie. And it's not even like we were like backpacking. You know how people probably like hit a wall when they're really out in the wilderness? Like, no, I mean, it was a lot of, first of all, it's like a big shock going from Portland to the Alvord Desert. It's just like, I'd never been there. And it's like total expanse of dry, like nothing. And so it was a little, like the first day was probably the most stressful. And then after that, we were kind of like, okay, we got into a groove and like, yeah. And the other thing I'll say is that the Alvord Desert is cool. And I do think that people should see it, but like, I kind of feel like that was the one place where I'm like, I don't need to see it again. Like it was my least, it was still really cool, but it was probably like my least favorite of the places that we visited.
It's a place where, I don't know if you felt this way, but like I got there and I was like, cool, here it is. But then there's not a lot to like do once you're there. Stargazing is cool, unless you're like doing land sailing or something on a playa.
Exactly. Yeah. I kind of felt like, I saw it. It's, it's there. I can come back to it, but I didn't feel like there was a ton of like exploration, and I could be wrong. Like I'm sure there's people that love it. I always feel, Jamie, like when I come on this podcast, I'm going to alienate someone by saying something bad about somewhere in Oregon, with my hyper specific opinions about different Oregon cities. But yeah, it was cool, but that was my least exciting part of the trip, I think.
Well, okay. That was your first day. You're at the desert, you camp out, you do the stargazing. Day 2, you said you were trying to head along the southern border. So where did you go from the Alvord Desert?
So, okay. Day 2, so we didn't quite follow that like every single day along the southern border. So day 2, we spent the whole day in the Steens Mountain. Mm-hmm. So we left our spot in the Alvord. We went to Field Station. Again, filled up on gas, got a milkshake. The milkshakes there are supposed to be like pretty well known. They were good. And then we headed up to the mountain, and there's like a Steens Mountain loop that you can do, which is like, I think it's like 70 miles, I want to say. And you can explore a ton of stuff. Like there's hiking trails, you can camp, amazing views. And so we just spent the whole day up there and camped up there that night. So we did, let's see, what did we do? After we left Fields, went up into the mountain, and we just kind of bopped around that day. We found this little river, the Donner and Blitzen River is what it's called. And we just we found some rocks and hung out at the river for a couple of hours. We found some like little side trails and went for some mini hikes. There's these amazing just like canyons and vistas just all over the place. So we took in those sites, and I was really taken aback actually by the wildflowers out there. like, I wish I had a better sense. I looked up some of them, but like there's paintbrush, coreopsis, obviously sagebrush, but like there's just really beautiful like plant life out there. And, you know, it was the middle of summer, so I'm sure it would be even better if I'd gone like a couple months earlier. But I didn't really know what to expect when I went up there. I maybe looked at like a couple of blogs to see what the Steens Mountain is like, but it's amazing. Like that, I will say, like, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool, like, Western Oregon, evergreen trees and rivers person, but this was incredible. Like, it was just, like, the canyons and these kind of, like, quickly changing scenery. It's a really special place.
And I'm sure that was kind of just amplified during this time, during COVID, just being in the mountains and having, like, fresh air and, like, I guess, was it that crowded in the mountains here?
No, not really. So we camped at this site called Fish Lake Campground, and it was busy, I'll say. I think I don't know, Jamie, have you been there? Like, I think it's a reasonably populated one.
It's got the lake there, which is nice. It's a nice place to camp. I mean, I stayed there in the fall once, and it was, you know, half full. But I imagine, you know, there's not a ton of places to camp up there, like in established campgrounds. So that's going to be pretty busy. There
were a couple. So we just ended up at that one because that was like close to where we were when it was starting to get towards the end of the day. And yeah, like we found a spot, no problem. We weren't right on the lake, but it was good. Like, but definitely busier than I thought it'd be because of how remote this whole area is. Yeah, it was busy. So yeah, I mean, but it was just like, I would love to go back to Steens. Like, I think any time of year you go, I'm sure there's just something different to see. You know, we saw, like, one of my favorite things randomly, like after seeing these really sheer drops and, you know, these gorges, we came to a flatter, more gentle area. And there was just this meadow filled with like yellow flowers and a gentle stream running through it. And it was just like so picturesque. And I was just like, where are we? Like, it was just amazing.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So that was day 2.
Day 2.
And where did you go from there?
So from there, day 3, we left our campsite at Fish Lake and came down. We finished the loop and we ended up in a town called French Glen. And so there's like a little store, a little restaurant there. And so again, filled up on gas, got some food. And then, so I wanted to go kind of along the southern border. I wanted to like dip into Nevada a little bit. And so we headed south on Highway 205. And I think it's also known as Fields Denio Road. And it takes you into Nevada and you're kind of like in Nevada. You can take a junction that'll take you back into Oregon on Highway 140. So we did that. We were in Nevada for about an hour, really kind of rocky, sparse landscape. And then when we got back into Oregon, that took us back into Lake County. And again, I keep saying this, but it was just another really amazing, almost like otherworldly landscape. So I don't even know what this place was called. I looked it up later, and I think the best that I could identify it was, I think it's the Langslet Monument, which is like, I had like, there was no sign or anything, but it was just this like viewpoint, and out in front you can see like miles and miles of just empty space, and like there's low mountains in the background. Mm-hmm. But it looked like outer space. Like there was just nothing. Like it was different than the Alvord Desert because there was like sagebrush. You could see the mountains in the distance, but it was like this sheer drop, like right in front of this viewpoint, and then just space. Oh my
gosh. And
again, like just a totally different landscape in Oregon that I just didn't know was there.
Oh,
so
sounds
cool.
So cool.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about, Jamie? Have you been there? Like,
I don't know this particular place. I've been to that area, Lake County, in that part of the state. It's such a cool spot where you kind of are on the edge of the Great Basin. there, which extends off into like Southeast Oregon, Nevada,
Yeah.
Utah. But you're kind of like on where the high desert meets that, and these drop-offs like you're talking about with just like these endless expanses of what feels like nothing, right? I mean, of course,
I shouldn't call it nothing. Yeah.
There's stuff out there, but it's
Yeah.
pretty sparse. And to me, I've always felt like it's almost like standing at the edge of the ocean, where you just have this huge expanse that feels like infinite.
Yeah.
You're standing at the edge of it. It's such a cool place to be.
It was amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And again, just how much the landscape changes in a short amount of time will never stop being amazing to me. Like, you know, just within a day, we went from the Alvord Desert to Steens Mountain, where there's just like, you know, green meadows, and then back to this. Like, it's so amazing.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so by this point in your road trip, were you getting into like some type of road trip groove? Were you like picking up tips and tricks?
Yeah, I think by this point we were used to doing like a lot of driving every day. And so we'd kind of gotten into a good pattern of like switching off. We had, this is key. We had like an audiobook that we were listening to that kind of helps. It's like, I think we did listen to music too, but like more than music, it kind of helps you get through the long stretches of driving because you're just like so engaged for long periods of time. And so that was good. And yeah, we'd kind of gotten into a good routine of like packing up the campsite, setting it up somewhere else, which again, I wouldn't do so often if I was going to do this again. But I'm glad we did this. Like, I'm really glad that I have had this experience. But yeah, road trip was in a good groove at that point.
So you come back into Oregon. You come back in through Lake County. Where did you go from there? What was your next plan?
Our next stop was Klamath Falls. And here I do have to admit, we stayed in a motel that night. Didn't camp that night. And so we just were like, you know what? Sometimes you need some pizza. And so we got a motel. I actually have a friend who was in Klamath Falls at the time. Shout out to Tim Trainer. He's now with the Redmond Spokesman. But he took us around a little bit. We went to Upper Klamath Lake, did a little bird watching, and just hung out. It was a really beautiful summer evening. And so, yeah, you know, we were back into civilization for that day, and kind of just experienced the beauty of that Upper Klamath Lake. Tons of birds out there. And yeah, even as we were approaching that area, it got, you know, like after being in that sparse Lake County area, as we got closer to Klamath Falls, it got green again. We were seeing, you know, a lot more birds, a lot more kind of like green plant life. And it was just, again, a different scene.
Wow, such a cool area for bird watching in particular. I love the Klamath Falls area for like, you know, I've gone there mostly for bald eagles, but like it seems like there's so many amazing kinds of birds. Did you see anything in particular up there?
I remember seeing pelicans. Like, I mean,
Cool.
Waterfowl is the thing I remember seeing the most. I don't think we saw eagles. But yeah, like I just remember sitting at the edge of the lake and seeing like, well, there was a ton of like ducks and stuff in the water. And then I do remember we saw some pelicans.
Wow, so cool. Well, and you had a nice relaxing time in Klamath Falls.
Yes.
Got your pizza, got
my
your
pizza.
bed.
Yes. And then the next day we were back at it. So I really wanted to, anybody who spent like 5 seconds with me knows that I really love the Southern Oregon, Northern California coast. And so that I thought was a perfect way to end our trip. Mm-hmm. So we made our way there. And so for night 4 and night 5, we camped in that area. So we camped in the Redwoods. We saw some of my favorite beaches. Harris Beach and Whales Head are two that I really love. And yeah, I lived in that area for a while. And so, you know, that's kind of nostalgic for me. So we spent the last 2 days exploring some of my old favorite haunts. And that was just, you know, getting back to my beloved, like, evergreens and rivers. So it was a nice way to end the camping part of the trip.
And what campsites were you staying there?
God, what did we stay at? I can't remember what we stayed at in the Redwoods, but then The last night we stayed right on the coast. It's called Clifford Camp County. It's a county park, and it's right just south of the Oregon border. It's like a mile into California on the coast on 101. I can't remember where we stayed in the redwoods, but yeah. So, I mean, but there's tons of spots. And I should note the only place that I think there was only one place where we reserved a campsite beforehand. Everything else was just like first come, first serve, which is probably a little dicey, but it worked out. So
yeah, those campsites along the coast are so gorgeous there.
Yeah.
I know
super
that
windy.
Yeah. I know. So you lived in Brookings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did you, I know Brookings is a great place for food. And I know there's some spots that you've recommended to me for Brookings. Did you eat at any place in particular you really liked?
You know what I'm going to say. Yeah. So you have to visit Kun Thai restaurant. Like I truly don't think you can find better Thai food in Oregon. Like I'm a big Thai food fan and it's all good, but yeah, it's the best. Like, yeah, so we definitely stopped there, and that's like one of the big reasons I like to keep going back.
Oh. I love this, like going from like camping out in the Alvord Desert and presumably cooking food on a camp stove or whatever, and going from that, this like arid desert, cooking in the middle of nowhere to like eating
Thai food
amazing
on the coast.
Thai food on the coast in one trip. I mean, I think that sort of highlights what you're talking about on this trip, is seeing the, redwoods and playa and mountains and wildflowers and ocean. Like that's such an incredible variety to see on just one trip.
And I mean, that's what I wanted. Like, I just wanted to cover a bunch of ground, and yeah, that's what we were able to do. Like, I do think, like I said, it would have been nice to spend a little more time, like in Steens and, even at Klamath Falls. Like, there's so much to explore in any of these areas that you could spend the whole week in any of them and get just as much out of it, I think. But yeah, it was definitely an epic adventure.
And it sounds like you and your friend were brought even closer through this trip, and no friend fallouts happened.
We are still friends. Yeah. Like
Okay.
I said, she was extremely patient with my like crazy ideas and wanting to do all of this in a really short period of time. So yes, we are still good friends, and I'm extremely grateful that she was willing to, like, that someone was willing to do it with me, because it definitely would not have been like a fun undertaking on my own, I think.
Yeah.
Or safe. Like, I think this is something you got to do, like, with somebody who's willing to go on the adventure.
Yeah, I'm sure someone listening is going to think, wow, this is a really cool road trip. I got to go on something similar to myself. Aside from what you're saying about spending maybe some more time at certain places, do you have any tips, any recommendations for folks who maybe want to undertake this themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think just be flexible. Like, I had such a strict idea of what I wanted to do at first, and we were able to accomplish most of it. But by the end, I was definitely, like, both of us were tired, and like there were some things where we were just like, yeah, I'm not going to do it this time. And I think it's good to just be okay with that. Like, let the whole point of a road trip is to, like, let the road take you where it will. And I think by the end, I had gotten a little bit better at relaxing and, like, okay, it's like a road trip doesn't have to be all, like, super planned out. And I would relax a little bit more next time and just be like, okay, there's a cool site. Let's stop there. And I think I have gotten better about that since this trip, but this trip is a big reason that I have kind of, like, realized that.
Yeah. It's a great lesson for people, whether they're going to the Alvord Desert or if they're just taking a road trip to the coast or wherever. Flexibility. That's something it took me a while to learn as well. As you can make an itinerary all day, but it's not always or rarely going to actually pan out the way you actually want it to.
Yeah. And then, I mean, other than that, I would just say, like, we had a pretty good situation, with the car. We didn't have any issues with, like, running out of gas or, like, running out of water or anything like that, but just be prepared. Like, we had a tank of gas, like, with us in case we ran low. Just stop and like refill on supply. Obviously, like, just basic things like that, which I had never done because I'd never been camping. But, definitely, like, all those cliched things about like being prepared are absolutely true and will make for a much more pleasant trip.
Well, I have to ask, Jayati, do you have another epic road trip that you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I don't have anything planned right now, but the part of the state that I didn't get to see, and I still haven't really spent a lot of time, is kind of like the eastern border of the state, like the Owyhee Canyons, Hell's Canyon, like that area. I used to live in northeastern Oregon, but I didn't get out to that far side very much. And so I think next time, maybe that's the place.
Maybe or maybe not take the Bronco. Nope.
The Bronco is for aesthetics.
Well, Jayati, we look forward to hearing all about that road trip when and if you take it.
We'll be sure to give you guys a call.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on today and telling us all about your epic adventure, and I hope it inspires some folks to go check out some parts of the state they have not been to themselves. Thanks for coming on, Jayati.
My pleasure.
Well, folks, I think that will wrap things up for today. But until next time, you can watch our videos on the Oregonian's YouTube channel and view all of our travel and outdoors coverage on OregonLive.com/travel, as well as HereIsOregon.com.
Please leave us a rating or review if you enjoy the show. And if you want to support this podcast and our local journalism, please consider a subscription to Oregon Live. You can find details at OregonLive.com/pod support. Also, if you're a fan of the show and you are interested in potentially sponsoring it, you can get in touch with our marketing people at advertise@Oregonian.com. This episode of the show was produced by me, Vicki Connor, alongside Jamie Hale, Andrew Thien, and Elena Neal Sachs.
Stay safe and happy travels, everyone.